Obviously, everyone's had a chance to read our bios individually, except in the case of Adi, since he's the last-minute replacement. So I guess I'll let everyone just take, one minute or less to introduce themselves in case you didn't get a chance to read the bios. My name's Kevin Lee. I've been doing digital marketing for 23 years, 24 years actually. Started Didit 21 years ago. So this is still exciting, which is why I'm still doing it. So Adi, why don't you do a quick introduction?
Sure. My name's Adi Paul. I'm the CEO of a 3-year-old bricks, 2 clicks retailer for wine and spirits. We have a location, a brick and mortar location in the East Village in Alphabet City. For those of you from outside New York, that's in Manhattan, across the bridge. And we have an e-commerce platform as well, through which we try and sell to 38 different states.
My name is Jake Davidow. I head up media buying at JP Chase. Started off in search marketing and kind of built out the team. We built an internal search agency, really, at Chase. And that has grown into other things, and now we run all media buying out of an internal team.
My name is Belén. I work at the Wildlife Conservation Society, and I like to say that I have the coolest job in New York City because my job is to get people to come to our wondrous parks, which is the Bronx Zoo, Central Park Zoo, New York Aquarium, Prospect Park Zoo, and Queens Zoo. So clearly we have bricks and mortar presence, and we drive much of both our interaction and our attendance via digital channels.
So I guess my first question is really around, given the diversity of all the hyperlocal channels and methods of touch points and targeting that is available, what do you guys feel is most exciting, either that's working for you now or that you're just sort of really excited about with regards to hyperlocal marketing and media?
Sure. So I know we're going to talk about this later, but what we found really exciting right now is meshing direct mail with digital. And direct mail's already gone programmatic, and what we're trying to do is see how we can engage with our customers using direct mail in a little more unique way than they're traditionally used to, which is ironic because now traditionally they're advertised to through Facebook, Instagram, etc. So direct mail actually helps us stand out. But the challenge is getting that that engagement to convert to a digital platform and then leading the customer on the journey. But that's something that we're working on with a few, we feel, innovative products, and that's something that we're most excited about right now.
I think for us, location as a signal of the moment that somebody is in and the mindset that they're in is very exciting. I think that with so much of advertising is really, broadcasting, getting your message in front of people when they're not in the moment, and there's a lot of clutter. What location does is it allows you to talk to somebody whilst they're trying to solve a problem. So search is such an effective medium because, you have somebody putting their hand up and saying, I'm looking for the best credit card, or I'm looking for a mortgage, and then you get to have that conversation with them. I think by being able to tie in location and interpret, if somebody's in an open house or in an auto dealership or wherever they are, you have almost the permission to step in and say, I can help you with this.
I would definitely agree with Jake. For us, a number of our parks are smaller parks that are in areas where there's a lot of things to do. New York Aquarium being the best example of that because it's located in Coney Island. So while we have our members and our ticket buyers who we already have data on them where we can sort of tell them what's new, why they should go out, as along with our other owned channels, there is this unique opportunity to reach out to people who are right nearby, literally right nearby, enjoying the beach, enjoying Luna Park, about to get on the cyclone, where we can reach out to them and say, hey, stop by to the New York Aquarium and enjoy our sea lion show, for example. So I think that right moment at the right location with that mindset where they're clearly going out, clearly enjoying themselves, is a real opportunity for our organization.
Great, thanks. As an aside of another data point on direct mail, we as a search agency got into direct mail because direct mail turned programmatic. And when we take over campaigns of folks who are doing direct mail the old way, we layer in digital, some pretty cool stuff comes out of that. So by adding personalized URLs or promo codes to the direct mail, which identify the individual recipient because they're unique to each recipient, it completely eliminates friction from a lot of the buy flow. And we've seen, conversion rates increase by over 20% as a result of that. So, direct mail may seem very old school, but it's actually gotten pretty sophisticated. I know the nonprofit community uses it as well. My next question is really about, a lot of folks sort of see the hyperlocal marketing as intersecting pretty heavily with apps, right? So iPhone apps, Android apps, et cetera. But you also hear a lot of, horror stories about how people spent $500,000 developing an app. They had to pay for installs because they couldn't get them organically, and then there was a huge churn rate. So where do you guys think apps belong? Should you just be piggybacking on other people's apps that people are heavy users of, or should you actually have an app strategy of your own? You don't have to go in order. Any order is fine.
So we're actually in the process of developing our app strategy, and one of our commitments is to not just use technology for technology's sake, but to make sure it will actually deepen or further our customers' experience. And so we look at the the importance of a native app differently based on the park. For the Bronx Zoo, which is an all-day experience, it's a massive park. It's one of the largest urban zoos in the country. There is so much storytelling that really is difficult for us to convey unless it's through an enriched app experience. An HTML5 site just isn't going to do it. So we're taking a very phased approach so that our current product is HTML5. It's a mini website at app.bronxzoo.com, and it just will tell you where to go and what's happening with an easily updatable CMS. But our next phase will be a product that does that, so enhances the in-park experience, but uses hyperlocation, beacon technology, so that when a person is at our bison exhibit, they will be able to familiarize themselves with the much deeper story of our organization's conservation efforts to keep the bison alive and bringing them back from extinction in the Midwest, which is sort of a core part of our organization's identity. So for us, we are in the app space when it makes sense, and we are very cautious about not either over-investing or delivering a product that people don't want. So we're taking a phased approach because we are an arts and culture organization and we don't have tons of money to burn on projects like that. But
that actually brings up an interesting point that I hadn't really thought about that is true for events as well, which is this idea that an app doesn't have to be permanent, right? So you're perfectly happy if they show up at the Bronx Zoo and use the app, they engage with it all day long, and it allows them to see all sorts of backstory on the gorilla exhibit while they're there, right? And then at the end of the day, maybe if they're not coming back for another year, they delete the app. Same thing with a lot of the conferences I've been to is there's sort of a conference app, and you're not expected to use it all year long. You're expected to use it just for a brief period of time. As far as another question is this idea behind, I wanted to expand on what Jake had mentioned about this idea that location tells you a lot about an individual that go beyond traditional media buying parameters like demographics or psychographics, right? So location as a way to telegraph intent in much the same way that search does. I'd love to have you guys sort of opine on that a little bit and how that's ended up being useful both from a targeting perspective for you, but also maybe from a messaging perspective, because you sort of know they're in the mall, or you know they're at an auto dealership, or you know they're at an event like today.
I think, there's so much talk about, and it's not just talk, obviously, but data is powering a lot of the programs that we run, first party, third party, and we obviously, you know, segmentation and all of the big data projects that as marketers we're involved in. I think when you boil down the human experience, though, you have moments in time where you can speak to somebody, you know, and be received in a way that's actually really helpful, whether that person's a customer or not. And so being able to understand either where that person has been, if they've been visiting car dealerships, for instance, a series of car dealerships, or if they're in that moment right there and then, you know, you've probably got a few minutes to be able to put a few of these signals together to understand that they're in market and be able to have that conversation. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity when you start having these little closed loop kind of buckets of intentions and signals. That location can be one of them. That you know will trigger a message that says, hey, you know, you're looking for a mortgage right now. We could probably help you with that. You know, especially, you know, and if you're an existing customer who already has a relationship with us, even better. Then, you know, here's how you could get 100,000 Sapphire points when you get that mortgage. You know.
It's interesting you mentioned points, right? So does location also give, and then anybody can answer, you know, give you some guidance as to what kind of promotional messaging you might use? I mean, obviously in direct mail, you know, promotions are used pretty heavily with coupon codes. Certainly in online affiliate marketing, promotional codes are used really heavily to try to make the person feel special with a discount, or they get something unusual as a result of engaging. Have you found that location also potentially can guide that kind of promotional strategy at all?
I mean, I think there are a number of ways you can play that. You know, I think if there's, so I think there's an opportunity for marketers and where you can surprise and delight people based on where they're at. You know, if you think about it in terms of aligning with certain concerts or certain sporting events and things like that, I think, you know, once you're tied in and invested in potential people that you want to talk to that are on location, I think it does open up a lot of surprise and delight opportunities that, you know, we as a sponsor of major events like the US Open and things like that are absolutely looking at ways we can, you know, engage with people in a way that elevates the experience and really, you know, helps the affinity to the brand.
Sure, that's pretty cool. I mean, for those of you who don't know, there's all sorts of hyper-local targeting that can be done in programmatic display, programmatic audio, and programmatic video that relates to either geofence, which would be mobile-based advertising within an app, or IP-based targeting, which would be knowing what the Wi-Fi here's IP address is, and therefore, you know, targeting specifically to that IP address. That sort of brings me to another thought that I had, which I'd be interested in hearing your perspectives on. We didn't necessarily discuss this ahead of time, but a lot of you have sort of both a B2B and B2C strategy, right? So whether it's, you know, corporate packages for the various parks, or whether it's, you know, channel partners in banking, or potentially corporate gifting in the case of, you know, wines and liquors, you know, has location been sort of a driver of that? So, for example, is there a difference for proximity? Does proximity of a B2B partner indicate maybe they're a better fit or a worse fit, anything like that?
I can comment on that. Location helps us not so much as a signal for B2C, but as a B2B, what you mentioned, figure out what the demands and what the expectations of a customer would be. New York City, corporate gifting, you know, we've seen trends it's more last minute, it's more local. There's a lot of clients that they do business within this ecosystem. Smaller cities outside, it's not the same thing. There's a lot of gifting happening to different states, right? So we know to anticipate that based on where we're marketing. Obviously, if we're marketing to New York City, we like to emphasize, the speed of the delivery and same day. So it helps us tailor our messaging. And on a B2C side, location, and this isn't hyper-local, but I think we were talking about it in the green room earlier, but location helps us tailor our message again, because the way I would market a product to somebody who's living in Williamsburg would be different from the way I would do it to somebody living in the Upper East Side. Our messaging needs to change, our voice needs to change. So location definitely is a signal, but we use it in different ways to change our messaging based on who we're talking to.
Great. Well, I do want to get any questions from the audience and not monopolize the conversation up here. So if anyone's got any questions for the panel, we can certainly include those. Nobody's jumping up out of their chair, so I guess we'll continue. Wait, is there one? Oh, go ahead.
So we do not have the technology to understand necessarily if someone is looking outside of our sites at a certain animal and then linking that with an ask. However, we're actually migrating to Salesforce Marketing Cloud that will help us catalog and identify exactly that type of data for when they are in our sites, in our websites, and that could be at any of the park websites or at our mission-based global conservation site, wcs.org. And it's actually amazing how much traffic the animal-specific pages do get. So one of the dreams and one of the things we're working towards is to be able to do relevant storytelling for the species that a person may feel a deep attachment to, and then using that as an entry point to also educate them about the importance of their larger environment.
Yeah, I mean, we look at different signals. We look at different signals. And I think a lot of what we're talking about now is still future state. We're building out the stack required to be able to serve people and serve ads based on location. But I think as far as like web activity goes and retargeting off of what people have been looking at, I mean, yeah, I'd say we do a fair amount of that.
Grape, I have a follow-up question for the entire panel, which is really relating to this fact that in general with media buying and advertising, there's always been a price to relevancy trade-off as you get more tightly targeted in anything, psychographics, demographics, location. You sort of end up paying more as you eliminate the waste in your media buys. So you can get down to one-to-one marketing, right, which is the ultimate targeting, or you can do broadcast TV, which is sort of tonnage. And obviously there's a full gradient in between where as you get more and more targeted to refine your messaging, or you get more and more targeted because you think these are the highest value customers in an LTV analysis, et cetera. How are you thinking through that sort of balance? Because tonnage is cheap on a CPM basis, on a relative basis to sort of hyper-targeted, including hyperlocal or hyperlocal overlaid with psychographics or demographics. How do you think through that process of deciding, how much more should I pay for extra targeting?
I think it's going to depend on what your product is, right? Because you're going to have products where your market is only is only so small, and then that's your cost of doing business. Is going to be how targeted do you need to be for if you want to target small business owners, for one of our small business products, that's a very, very small market versus something like one of our more mass, cashback credit cards where, you want the reach, right, as opposed to that. So I think it's probably going to depend on what your business requirements are for that.
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, obviously testing, right? Testing some of these strategies, testing some of these refinements and the focused targeting to see if it's worth it. We've tried a couple of things where we've gone very niche, and we realized that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. So at this point, the focus is not so much on that. But on the flip side, we do use data that we're collecting from purchase patterns, et cetera, to then further refine some of the email marketing, et cetera, messaging that's going out from us. I think that's a demand from the customer. This is what I like. Don't show me anything else.
Great. Oh, do you have anything to say?
I was going to say that this is something that we haven't reached the point that you've described yet, but I do think that there's going to come a point in time when we will, because many of these technologies that are developed are really developed for, the JP Morgan Chases of the world that have a robust physical presence in many, many, many locations. They're not necessarily developed, or for Walmarts or for Targets that have massive, massive bricks and mortar locations. They're not necessarily developed for an organization such as ours that has 5 and that are all located in the same place, which is New York City. So I do think that we have to be wary of jumping into partnerships with tools that were really meant for other people. But I will say that right now, one of our highest CPA channels is actually referral marketing. And while we're confident that we can bring that down, we believe right now, and we are gathering this data, that there's just something so much more powerful about a referral, like someone who comes in and comes into our database because their friend told them, I'm going to the Bronx Zoo and I want you to come too, or I just bought tickets for Brew at the Zoo, you should come with me. That there's just something that's a type of very tightly personalized, hyper targeted based on interests, as well as a number of things, and location also factors into that. So while hyperlocal and hyper targeting is incredibly valuable, it's not everything, and we will come to a point where we're going to have to wade through exactly what you're talking about.
Great, thanks. All of you, essentially, as part of your organizations, have what I guess you could call a retail presence or some kind of physical location. And often, you probably want to establish some kind of a permission relationship through various channels with that individual there. I'd love to hear, sort of which touch points you feel are the most valuable to get at the retail location. In other words, do you want their email address? Do you want them to sign up for SMS text messaging? Do you want them to install an app? Which things would you want and which priority? And then a follow-up question to that is sort of, is there sort of an HR and training element to that as well? Because, if you only ask, if only one of dozens of staffers or more, remembers to ask, then you're not going to build your database very fast. So first, sort of, which metrics do you like to collect at point of sale or store location or retail location? And then are there sort of training and HR related issues?
Sure. So this is an easy one for us because SMS is what we eventually ended up on. Just given the interaction in our store, people are in a rush. Once they've made the purchase, that email capture and just the tools weren't working out. But turns out SMS with an incentive to join a rewards program has a phenomenal conversion rate. But the challenge was ensuring that everybody remembered to collect it. And that ended up being essentially a training exercise. Today it works. I think we have a 90% capture rate. We did make missteps. We started this about 2.5 years ago. So we made some missteps, and that's dangerous. Because in today's world, you make a small mistake, and if you're a retail establishment like us, there's outlets to, for customers to leave reviews, and those are, hard to deal with. So, made a couple of mistakes, but this is working for us.
For us as an organization, what we value right now is email above all. We have a program called 5 Million Strong, which the goal is to get to a database of 5 million within 5 years. And that is going to be really used to power the movement and conservation side of our organization. So we have been evangelizing for several years now throughout the organization about the importance of email. And it's a process, especially with a large organization with so many different businesses, even within our park. So it is a process, but we're committed to it, and that is for us one of our key projects and initiatives right now.
So Jake, do you think that there will come a time where I go into my Chase branch and they ask for that additional data point from me, either an email address or an SMS mission relationship?
Well, we're so highly regulated that it's all, the amount of paperwork that you have to fill out anytime you want to do any kind of transaction with us, there's a series of data points in there that but it's, yeah, I wouldn't say there's any like one thing.
Well, I want to, again, give an opportunity for the audience to ask any questions that they might have of the panel. No? Oh, there's one.
Yeah. Thanks. If you guys are running a campaign, whether it be national or regional or even just in New York, and with localized messaging, one zip code or one neighborhood happens to stick out as performing much, much better than any other place you're running, what's your thought process there? What questions are you asking? What are you thinking about as to why did this work here so much better than anywhere else?
I'll take a stab at that one. Frankly speaking, if one neighborhood stuck out, and this was an outlier, given what we've seen in our past campaigns and over the years, I would question it, just to make sure we're looking at the correct data. But if we can identify the root cause for why we were seeing that kind of response, then that's something to then explore in other similar segments across the country to see if whatever worked over there can be replicated with in other similar pockets that we might see across the country.
I guess I'll comment, and since we do a lot of that kind of analysis for clients, is that in the United States in particular, there's a wealth of government-funded data that you can overlay down to even the ZIP+4 level, right? So depending on the business you're in, the census data or the IRS data about wealth and income might be really useful, or homeowners versus renters, or there's a lot of information that's available that can be put into the database and mashed up to try to understand, is this predictive? Can we then take what we learned about this outlier zip code or ZIP+4 and apply it to a broader campaign in an attempt to gain efficiencies? So it does absolutely end up being instructive. We had actually even built a technology before Google rolled out hyperlocal bidding, where we actually would clone campaigns into subcategories by zip code or by DMA or whatever, to take advantage of the fact that even the body mass index in each neighborhood is different, and we've got clients in the plus size beauty category, right? So you can get a map that shows you what the BMI is of a neighborhood. I mean, and the National Institute of Health funded it, so it's pretty fascinating. So any closing comments? We got 15 seconds, or we can just call it a day. I guess just join me in thanking the panelists, and catch us later.